There are love stories that the world watches from a distance, projecting onto them whatever magic and romance it needs. The relationship between Ollie MacGraw and Steve McQueen was exactly that kind of story. To the public, they were the ultimate Hollywood pairing. She, the luminous young actress whose face had graced the cover of Time magazine. He, the rugged motorcycle-riding embodiment of masculine cool. Their affair, their marriage, and their eventual collapse played out on the pages of every tabloid and entertainment column in America. But the full truth of what happened behind those closed doors, the control, the jealousy, the silencing of a woman at the very height of her powers, is a story that Ollie MacGraw has spent decades finding the courage to tell completely. Now at 85, she tells it with a clarity that is equal parts painful and liberating. To understand how Ollie MacGraw ended up in that marriage, you have to go back to where she started. Born in Bedford Village, New York, she grew up in a household filled with conflict, alcoholism, and instability. Her parents' constant fights left her craving an escape, a longing that would shape her choices for years to come. From a young age, MacGraw learned to seek her sense of self in the outside world, because the world inside her home offered very little. She found her first escape through modeling, eventually catching the attention of the legendary fashion editor Diana Vreeland, who helped open doors for her in New York's elite fashion circles. Those doors soon led to Hollywood. Her film debut came with 1969's Goodbye, Columbus, a romantic comedy that introduced her warm, intelligent screen presence to American audiences. But it was the very next year that would define her generation. Love Story, released in 1970, became a genuine cultural phenomenon. Her role as Jenny, the doomed young woman whose love story captured audiences' hearts, cemented her status as one of Hollywood's most sought-after leading ladies. The film grossed over $100 million worldwide, and MacGraw became one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. She was on the cover of Time. She was in demand everywhere. The future seemed boundless. It was during this period of triumph that she married Robert Evans, the powerful head of production at Paramount Pictures, who had championed her career from the beginning. In 1971, they welcomed a son, Joshua. She had fame, a powerful husband, a child, and a career that could have taken her anywhere she chose. What she could not have known was that the very next role Evans encouraged her to take would set in motion the most turbulent chapter of her life. In 1972, MacGraw was offered the chance to star as McQueen's character's wife in The Getaway, directed by Sam Peckinpah. According to her 1991 memoir, Moving Pictures, an autobiography, she almost turned the role down. She had a young son. She had a marriage. But there was another reason she hesitated, one she would only later admit openly. She already sensed what being in close proximity to Steve McQueen would mean. As she would later confess, she knew she was going to get into serious trouble. She was right. McQueen was legendary for his swaggering coolness. This was a man who could walk into any room and any man, woman, and child would go, "Whoa, what's that?" And I was no exception, she explained. He was incredibly attractive most of the time, but there was also danger. There was a bad boy there. For MacGraw, who had grown up in emotional instability and learned to find intensity intoxicating, the danger was not a warning. It was part of the attraction. Their affair began on location in Texas, and it quickly became the most talked-about romance in Hollywood. MacGraw embarked on a scandalous affair during the production of the film, leading her and Evans to break up. Their divorce was finalized in 1973. Evans, the man who had believed in her, cast her in Love Story, and given her a son, was blindsided. The betrayal was a wound that echoed through Hollywood for years. But MacGraw, consumed by what she herself described as a chemical pull, could see nothing beyond McQueen. Ollie met McQueen on the set of The Getaway, and the pair fell in love quickly, getting married in 1973 in Wyoming. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale continuation. Two of cinema's biggest stars beginning a life together. From the inside, the cracks appeared almost immediately. McQueen insisted that MacGraw sign a prenuptial agreement stipulating that in the event of a divorce, she would not seek anything, and she complied. He also asked her to stop working, and she left her career at the height of her fame to devote herself to raising their son. This was not a quiet request. It was a condition. The most sought-after actress in America, at the absolute peak of her career, walked away from Hollywood because the man she loved demanded it. "He was the biggest movie star in the world and he didn't want me to work," she said. "So I essentially quit making movies and took care of my child." As she wrote in her memoir, she played cook, cleaning lady, and simple woman to the hilt. She had traded the spotlight for a life that existed entirely in service of someone else's comfort. Their home was a secluded beach house in Malibu. The couple spent their time half-naked on the beach with regular barbecues and endless beer. And while they had Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau as neighbors, they mainly resided with what she called real people. "It wasn't like you looked out your window and here come 35 people carrying vodka drinks in bikinis," she said. "That is how Malibu is now." It was a different time. A lucky time. For a while, the simplicity of it felt like peace. But peace and silence are not the same thing, and what filled the silences in the McQueen household was anything but peaceful. Living with McQueen meant adapting to his moods, insecurities, and controlling nature. His public image masked private struggles with trust and substance use, and Ollie found herself shrinking. Her voice muted, her choices constrained. Friends noticed the change. The vibrant woman who once lit up rooms grew quieter and more isolated. Invitations dwindled, phone calls shortened, and Ali's world narrowed to caregiving and maintaining peace. The woman who had graced the cover of Time magazine was now largely invisible, not by accident, but by design. Someone else's design. That McQueen's jealousy was relentless. "He didn't want me to look at another man, let alone talk to one." Yet in a bitter irony that MacGraw has spoken about with great candor, McQueen himself was notoriously unfaithful, and rumors of his affairs circulated widely. He demanded total devotion while offering none of his own. It was a double standard enforced not through conversation but through fear, the fear that MacGraw later admitted had governed much of her behavior throughout the marriage. She had spent her childhood afraid of instability, and now she was afraid of abandonment. Those two fears, stacked on top of each other, kept her silent for years. McQueen's volatile lifestyle only worsened their marriage. He drank heavily, used drugs, and disappeared for nights on end. His infidelities became impossible to ignore, fueling Ali's growing despair. The once envied couple became locked in a cycle of mistrust, betrayal, and emotional isolation. Ali herself began drinking more, spiraling under the weight of her unhappiness. The alcoholism that would later require professional treatment had its roots in this period, in the attempt to numb a pain she was not yet strong enough to name or confront directly. "I always thought he'd leave me," she later admitted. "I don't know what I thought, except that I wasn't real." That phrase, "I wasn't real," is perhaps the most devastating thing Ali MacGraw has ever said about her years with McQueen. She had become a ghost of herself, present in her own life only in the ways that served him, invisible in all the ways that might have nourished her. Ali later reflected that she had mistaken intensity for intimacy, and that love had become survival. By 1977, she had reached the limit of how long a person can survive on those terms. She told McQueen she wanted to return to acting, not a demand, not a threat, but a statement of a need that was entirely reasonable. His response was devastating in its coldness. According to biographer Mark Elliott, he told her plainly, if she went back to work, they would file for divorce. Her decision to take a role in Peckinpah's Convoy sealed their fate. In 1978, after 5 turbulent years, their marriage ended in divorce. The divorce was the end of the marriage, but it was not the end of the grief. Steve McQueen's death in 1980 from mesothelioma devastated Ali. Despite their troubled past, she had loved him deeply. The loss compounded her grief and fueled a growing dependence on alcohol. She was 41 years old and had to find a way to mourn a man who had both captivated and diminished her, to hold in the same heart the love that had been real and the harm that had also been real. Looking back decades later, she offered a reflection that contained both grief and grace. She wished they had both grown old sober. It was an acknowledgement of what the addiction had stolen from them both, and of a life they might have shared if they had found their way to healing. The years that followed were a long, difficult climb. She took on new roles, a part in Convoy, and later a 14-episode arc on the primetime soap Dynasty in 1984. But the sparkle of her earlier stardom was difficult to recapture, and Hollywood had moved on. More critically, she herself had changed. The woman who had once walked onto a film set with the full force of her ambition intact was now carrying years of suppression, grief, and addiction. By the early 1990s, she entered treatment at the Betty Ford Center. It was there that the real work began, not the work of acting, but the far harder work of recovering herself. Her memoir, Moving Pictures, 1991, offered raw honesty about her life with McQueen and her personal struggles. It resonated deeply, sparking conversations about addiction, the price of fame, and the sacrifices women make for love. By 1994, she left Hollywood entirely, settling in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where she built a quieter life centered on painting, yoga, meditation, and community work. She never remarried, choosing instead to embrace independence, sobriety, and self-discovery. In Santa Fe, she found what Malibu had never been able to offer her: a life that was genuinely her own. She has now been sober for more than 30 years, a milestone she once believed was beyond her reach. She practices yoga. She tends her garden. She has spoken openly about how the stillness of the desert gave her permission to simply exist, without performance, without fear, without the constant vigilance of managing someone else's volatility. She reconnected with her love story co-star Ryan O'Neal, and while Evans said that of his 7 marriages, his time with MacGraw meant the most to him. The relationships she now values most are rooted in equality and mutual respect, things that were largely absent from her years with McQueen. Today, at 85, Ollie MacGraw speaks with striking honesty about her marriage to Steve McQueen. "There were wonderful days and dreadful days," she reflects. "I am not a victim, but I sacrificed too much. I lost myself trying to keep him, and it nearly destroyed me." That statement is not bitterness. It is clarity, the kind that only comes after a long, honest reckoning with the past. She does not pretend the love was not real. She does not pretend the harm was not real either. Both things were true simultaneously, and holding both at once, without collapsing into either romanticization or resentment, is perhaps the hardest and most honest thing a person can do. Ollie MacGraw was once introduced to the world as the face of romantic tragedy, a young woman whose character in Love Story taught an entire generation that love means never having to say you're sorry. The real lesson of her life, told now in full, is something considerably more complex and considerably more powerful. That love which demands your silence, your career, your identity, and your voice in exchange for its continuation is not love at all. And that the most important story any woman can tell is the one in which she finally, after years of waiting, chooses herself. This script draws on Ollie MacGraw's 1991 memoir Moving Pictures *, verified published interviews, and authenticated biographical sources. *.